Welcome back to high school history, and today what we're going to do is look at the toppers paper that was put up on the CBSE website some time ago and analyze the paper and see what the student did right that she was able to get full 80 on 80 in this paper. Right, so let's launch straight into the paper here. So I've got a PDF of the paper from the CBSE website here, and let's go step by step through each of these papers, through each of these pages. So as you can see on the first page, the student has started in an ascending order. So she's very clearly marked out that this is the beginning of part A. And if you look at the left hand side margin, she has marked out answer number 1 very clearly. And as you can see, the subpoints have also been marked in the left hand margin. Right, so the question was, what were the sources of income for the village panchayat? So she has written a short part sentence introduction to an answer, and that is exactly how you should do that as well. So she writes, the sources of revenue of village panchayat are, and then point 1, and you see how the numbering scheme has been done. So when she's used the regular Arabic numerals to mark the question number, the answer number, she has used the I numerals to mark out the subpoints, right? So she writes 2 points here, taking care that she's leaving one line after each point. What it does is it makes your answer look neater, even if you don't have an amazingly beautiful handwriting, which she has, of course, an averagely good handwriting here. This is, I wouldn't say this is like handwriting like pearls, but very legible. She's left between two words a reasonable amount of space. Remember, the examiner is always under pressure to check fast, and this kind of a handwriting really does help the examiner to actually check your paper effectively. Also, leaving off one line between two subpoints also is visually a very effective way of presenting your answer, right? So what she has done is she's actually written much more than was actually required in the answer. She could have simply written these 2 points, that the village panchayat derived the sources of income. See, she's missed it, but in this overall neatness of the answer, the examiner has let this pass, right? So if you look at this answer, what she's done is actually she's saying the same thing. The sources of revenue of the village panchayat are, and the village panchayat derived its sources of revenue, I think she means, from, right? It's largely the same introduction that she's written to both. So in the first point here, she writes, Mughal chronicles such as Akbari, written by Abul Fazl, provides the intricate information. Even though this question was not asked, she's still given that information. If you take my advice, it really wasn't required. It's just additional information that she's put. She also talks about East India Company accounts also, leaving behind records which go on to show the sources of revenue that were marked out. And then in the second part of the answer, again note how she's put an introductory sentence, and then again there are 2 subpoints, and the subpoints have been numbered in the left hand margin. And she then goes on to talking about 2 sources of revenue. One would be contributions made by individuals and contributions made for community welfare. And another thing to note is that she has underlined key phrases here, right? So contributions, various individuals. Here, she's talking about community welfare activities, profit made from the agricultural produce. So even though if you go and look at the textbook, this was not exactly how it was mentioned in the textbook, but the very fact that she's mentioned this so neatly, she's written it out so neatly, the examiner has actually let it pass, right? Also, I would observe that she's written more than was required. So she has taken up some extra time here. Now, if you're a fast writer, you may risk it. But if you tend to write slowly, I would advise you to just stick to what a 2-mark question has asked you. There is really no need to give any extra information. Right, going on to the next. Now that she's finished the answer, you can see she has left 2 lines here, and she has drawn a long line right across the sheet to indicate that the answer is over. All the underlining that she has done with the help of a ruler. Now, you can underline freehand, but generally when you're underlining long phrases, then the lines can get crooked. So it's always good to use a ruler and a pencil to underline your key points. Then, of course, again, if you notice, the second question also, she gives a brief introduction of a sentence, and the introduction has been derived straight from the question paper. There is actually no difference, right? And then again, she has written her subpoints in I numerals, leaving again one line between 2 points. And again, she's also concluded the answer here. Though what is interesting is that she has not left two lines and not drawn a line across here either. I guess she was already feeling that I'm spending too much time and I'm writing too much and I might be actually losing out on time. So here she actually stops underlining it. It would have been good practice if she could have, drawn a line after every answer. But time is of essence in the board exams too. So I think she was kind of on the fly as well. She was making her decisions. Again, question three being a two marker, she gives a half sentence phrasal introduction, again leaves a line after each point. Here again, she goes back to drawing a line right across the page at the end of her answer. Then notice what she does. She has finished with section A and she starts with part B, section 1. So she very clearly marks out part B and section 1. She does not dive straight into answer 4. Part B is all about 4-mark answers. So again, if you notice, she's very clearly marked out the answer number. She's again left a line between the introduction and her first point. Again, points are clearly numbered. So you see that she's not using bullets or arrows, right? Now, using bullets and arrows is an old trick which examiners know, where the student is trying to, sort of fool the examiner into thinking that they may have covered all the points, right? Don't do that, because examiners get a little impatient when they only see bullet points. If you mark them clearly, as the student has done here, it only gives you an advantage, right? It shows a lot of confidence. It shows that you are very confident that you know all your points, that you're numbering your points, right? And when you appear as confident to your audience automatically tends to feel that you know a lot and tends to mark you accordingly, right? Again, in this answer, she has used the same technique of underlining the key points, right? And keep watching for the handwriting. Extremely clear. There is not a lot of striking out of words or just squiggling over the page where she's, written more than is required or something irrelevant. Very, very neat handwriting, very, very stable handwriting. She's still progressing through the paper. And again, you will see that every time she has left a number of lines, right, between two of her answers. She continues this pattern right through the sheet. So she's already on to page 8. She's writing on page 9 and 10. As you can see, the page numbers are given here. And her writing continues to be very, very stable. Each part, as you see, question number 7 was also a 4-marker. So she has been very stable with the number of points she's writing. She's not writing unnecessarily now. She is really using her words carefully, right? And most of the questions are generally very clear in what they are asking you to write. So she's also showing that intent, that I'm not wasting the examiner's time. I am writing what is relevant. And every time now she concludes an answer with with a concluding sentence as well. What also happens is that you will see it's largely a repetition of the uh, introduction only. So she's not writing a lot of extra material in her conclusion as well. Again, I want you to keep note of the fact that her handwriting remains largely stable right through. Okay, so she's on the 13th sheet already. She's halfway through her paper and she's still got a very stable handwriting. Now she moves on to the next section within the 4 markers. This was, of course, the value-based questions, which from this year on you will not be asked anymore. But here as well, she maintains the stability and the format that she has been using. Yeah, so we are halfway through her answer sheet. Now starts part C, where she is going to start writing her 8 markers. Now she makes an error. Okay, so she has just written answer, but she has not written the question number. So the examiner has written this for the examiner's own reference. Now, what is important to note is that she has already made a very good impression on the examiner, right? So the examiner is not really getting impatient with this, right? So She has been marking out her answers very clearly. She's been underlining keywords. So examiner is also saving a lot of time because the keywords, key phrases are completely staring out at the examiner. So there is no way that the examiner is missing any points or has to waste time searching for points so that she can score the student well. So the examiner is letting it pass. Again, you see that the introduction has become slightly longer than her previous questions. Because it is an 8 marker, you really need to set the stage for 8 marker questions. And if you have been watching our earlier videos, you may have noticed that we have been talking about how 8 markers are generally not about, okay, you write 8 points and you get your 8 marks. It is about treating the answer as a whole. So, have you really created this logically complete answer? Right? So, which is why you need to have a slightly longer introduction to really set the stage for the rest of the answer to come in. So, the question was perhaps about the partition of India and how did that lead to large scale violence and trauma, right? Or the question actually was how was the partition of India a culmination of communal politics? So you see, she's talked about how partition was tumultuous time. It was a time of large-scale violence and trauma and displacement. And then she goes on to say that the communal politics that started it is believed to be largely responsible for this partition of India. Then she launches into her points. Now look at what numbering scheme she's using. So she has divided her answer into a couple of larger points. Let's quickly go over that before we look into the nitty-gritties. So she has used the Roman numerals now, right, to mark out her larger points, right? So first of all, she says culmination of communal politics. Now, if you locate here, she's made an error. Yeah, uh, she's not squiggling out or scratching out that part as well. She's just drawn two straight lines across these words, right? So you kind of, so when you're reading this answer book in a hurry, you sort of miss this. So it doesn't really bother you as an examiner, right? So that's the first part. Then she's got a second part of her answer, provincial elections, and how that also contributes to, the build up to the partition. Then she's got a third major point where she talks about the Pakistan resolution, right? Um, and then, of course, she has a larger fifth point which talks about the suddenness of the partition, right? The people did not really um, uh, imagine that we'd suddenly have the partition of a country. Then she's got a fifth larger point where she talks about post war developments. So, soon after 1945, what are the developments in India as well as the political situation in England at this time, right? And how that impacts the situation in India. Then she talks about a sixth point where she brings attention to was there an alternative to the partition, right? And then look at something we had talked about in our earlier video as well, where we talk about using small graphics to sort of organize your answer. So what she's done is when she talks about the cabinet mission plan and how they had planned to divide the provinces into three categories. So she talks about section A, B, and C in a graphic format, right? So she's not describing in a lot of words. So she's actually saved a lot of her time in just doing this graphic and not describing it too much, right? And then she's got her seventh large point where she says that from the direct action day onwards, what were these inexorable events that led us to the partition? And it was really a point of no return, right? So she's got seven large points. And if you look at the total number of sub points, she's got 16 sub points. So the question was not about just writing 8 points, any 8 points, and getting your full 8 on 8, right? So you can see how well she has thought out the answer, right? So let's get back to the beginning of the question, right? And how she starts with communal politics, where she's talking about separate electorates. It's interesting to note here, she's not given a lot of dates. I mean, I would have expected, if I was checking in school, I would have expected the student, and I would have cut marks if the dates were not there. So 1909, 1919 being two very important years in terms of, separate electorates. So she's not mentioned the years, but she's talked about the idea, right? And she's talking about the separate electorate here. It creates a temptation among politicians to fight elections along sectarian lines. So she's talking about the aftermath of the political part, right, of the new politics that is emerging in India at this time in the early 20th century. Then she talks about religious identities which acquire a functional purpose, especially in terms of garnering votes, right? So religious identities are being used. So look at what she's also doing. She's underlining these key phrases. So I don't even have to read through the entire answer. So as an examiner, I was just okay. Separate electorate aa gaya, temptation aa gaya. We're talking about religious identities becoming politically functional. We are talking about some of the other minor examples that your textbook mentions, like music before mosque, and the cow protection, or rather the cow slaughter business, which was alienating the Hindus. Then you have the Arya Samaj Shuddhi movement and the Tanzim and Tabligh. All of this is mentioned in the textbook. But look how beautifully this has been organized in the answer. Then she takes the argument further, where she says communal politics were going to have an impact on the 1937 elections. For the fact that the Muslim League wanted a joint government in the United Provinces, right? So she underlines Congress won. She's then underlining a joint government in the United Provinces, but rejection, that the League's idea was rejected, and that made the League feel alienated, right? Then she moves on to how the Congress ministries themselves may have contributed to this feeling of alienation when they talked about anti-zamindar issues, right? Then how the Hindu Mahasabha ideology itself became quite divisive, right? And also what Maulana Azad had pointed out, that the Hindu Mahasabha members could also be members of the Congress, but a Congress member could not be also a Muslim League member. So it was so Maulana Azad, even though he's a loyal Congressee, he is pointing out that this could be leading to the alienation of the Muslim League in particular, and Muslims in general. Then she brings the argument further down. She is now beginning to use dates, as you can see. So she's got the elections of 1937 she's talking about the Pakistan resolution being passed in 1940. And then she's also talking about Sikandar Hayat Khan and Muhammad Iqbal, and what they had to say about this whole idea of Pakistan that was beginning to emerge. Then, of course, she talks very quickly about the suddenness of Pakistan, that nobody had really, guessed that India would suddenly be thrown into this path of, partition, and it became increasingly difficult for even the Congress and the Muslim League to continue with discussions where they were not talking about, a breakup of the country. Then she quickly brings the argument to post-war developments and how Jinnah emerges as the sole spokesman of the Muslims, and at least that's the claim, and moves on to the cabinet mission very quickly, right? And they talk about the cabinet mission being sent to India, and their first suggestion that provinces in India should be divided under three categories. That Section A would be Hindu majority, Section B would be Muslim majority, and Section C would include the northeastern part of India, which would also be a Muslim majority section, right? And then talks about Direct Action Day and how that leads to the beginning of riots, which showed no signs of going away, but actually increased right across North India, in Bengal and in Punjab in particular, right? And then she concludes her answer by saying thus partition was a combination of a long point in history which began with the communal politics of the 20th century. So she's actually largely paraphrasing the question that had come, that was partition, or how was partition a culmination of a long development of communal politics in the 20th century. So she's actually, brought the answer in very beautifully into her answer sheet. Another thing I would like you to note, when you look at your question paper and the instructions given therein, you said that the 8 markers should be about 300 words. But if you look at her answer, it is way beyond 300 words, right? There are no deduction of marks for exceeding word limit. So which is why also in our previous videos, we've talked about how, being very precise in your 2 markers and not wasting too much time in your 4 markers either will actually save you a lot of time in attempting your 8 markers. Remember, 8 markers are always seen as a total whole answer, never number of points, right? She does the same in the subsequent answers. You can see her handwriting remains largely stable. She is, writing faster now. You can feel that, right? But it is still legible. It has not become all, what in colloquial terms we call gujar muchar, right? She's still writing very neatly. However, you note she's still using these sub point numbers here. But when she's further subdividing, she could have written A, B, C here, right? But as an examiner, I might actually forgive her for making these arrows, because till now, checking her answer has not really stressed me out. In fact, I'm feeling very happy as I'm checking her answer paper, that she's written well, she's thought out her answers well, she's not wasting my time, she's not writing in these long paragraphs where I can't figure out, which point lies where, right? So she maintains this stability and this continuity right through all her answers, right? This is her third 8 marker that she's doing here again. Of course, she has stopped leaving lines between each point. It would have been nice. She still goes back to doing that here. You can see that she is already in a hurry now, right? She's feeling that she's running out of time. But if you look at the page number, she's still on page 27. You get a 48-page booklet. So there's plenty of place still left for you to write, right? Even though she has written a fair length of answers. So she is now beginning to get erratic. She's leaving lines here, yet she's forgotten to leave a line between these 2 points, or maybe a little earlier. But till now, as an examiner, I'm very happy with her paper. So my psychology is, this kid knows. So I might actually be giving her almost 30% more marks. Yes. So when you crack that system, you can actually get more marks than otherwise, if I was really scrutinizing your answers very closely. Now see, at the end of her 13th answer, she's actually forgotten to leave space. My guess is that she'd not written this point, and she'd written these points only towards the end, right? So she sort of starts with part D here without leaving a line, though she does remain careful enough to draw a line after she's finished this answer. So even in my visual field, I am seeing an end of that answer and the beginning of the next session. Again, she uses the same way as the question paper marks out the answer. So these will be now the passage-based questions. And the passage-based questions are numbered, of course, this is the major number, but they're not marked as ABC, the parts of the source-based question, right? So they come in as 14.1, 14.2, and so on. So she's using the same numbering scheme. Yes, it is very, very important that you use the same numbering scheme as is given in the question paper. Here again, she's being very, very particular about how much she's writing. She's not wasting a lot of time. So for 14.1 was a 2 marker. She's written her 2 sub points here very clearly. Again, taking care that she is underlining the keywords and phrases. So she continues to do that, right? She moves to 14.3. Again, she is erratically but still leaving out space. You can still read her handwriting. It's quite legible, though not as neat as how she had started out in the beginning, right? So you can see that there is a fair amount of stability in her handwriting, which is actually very, very important to make a good impression on the examiner, right? Again, at the end of each answer, she is, she continues to draw the line so that I know that the answer is over, right? Here, of course, she writes from this answer, I would suggest that go on to the next page, okay? So that it's not looking too cluttered, and also that the introduction and the parts of the answer are visible to the examiner together. So the examiner doesn't have to keep going back and forth to say, okay, what exactly were you writing? Again, she draws a line at the end of this answer. She has taken a continuation sheet. She takes care that her handwriting is still neat and legible. And now let's come to the map. Look at what she's done for the map. She has written the answers here, but she has also very, very clearly marked out her answer. So if you look at the map, you will see that she numbers her parts as well. So if you just write Amritsar, if you just write Agra, I don't know which part you're answering. A and B were already marked on the map. So here she has not, A, B, and C were already marked on the map. So she has not been required to write the question number here. But the others were about marking Agra and Amritsar, right? So she marks A for Amritsar, 17.1. A part is Amritsar and not the other way around. Otherwise, Agra would have been the wrong answer for the first part of the question, and Amritsar would have been wrong for the second part. I would, of course, advise you to attempt the map in pencil and not in pen as she has done, right? Because if you mark in pencil and if you later figure out that you made an error, you can always rub and write the correct answer. Yes, so it has become a little untidy. I think she was sort of running out of time. Maybe she did the map right at the end. I would suggest that you do the map right at the beginning, right? And this is the end of her answer script. So, right till the end, she has maintained underlining of keywords and phrases, drawing a line after every answer. She has slipped out a couple of times, slipped up a couple of times, but that really does not matter because she set a very good impression in the first half of her paper, right? So the first 10 minutes that any examiner would have been looking at her paper, the stage was set. She was the examiner was convinced that the student is extremely bright, has included all the points that were required. And even though she slips up a couple of times, she writes a lot of material that may not even be required for the answer, the examiner forgives her. This was helpful for you, this analysis of the topper's paper. And I hope when you are practicing, as you are doing your, sample papers and all, you will start making this a regular practice. Even if you're giving the boards sometime later and not immediately, I hope this video is helpful. So do not forget to click on the thumbs up button if you've liked the video. Leave your comment if you want any other topic for me to make a video on. And if you want regular notifications about the videos that I put up, which I try to put up regularly, you can subscribe to the channel as well. So wishing you all the best for your remaining board papers, and high school history wishes you bye bye.